Christ. Very irritating. Don't know what I'm going to do about this. Very irritating for the people who are patiently watching me buffer. Okay. So this is the official new year in North Africa. That's cool. Let's see. Well, I was quietly ranting to the clouds, as always. Um, but it's just really like disillusioning is not the right word, because that has already happened, right? I'm already disillusioned. But it's perverse is what it is. I think that's the right way to phrase it. It's perverse to know the good you could do, right? To know the ways we could solve problems that we know we have. To know how to make that change and have the power to do it. It's just wrong. Best of luck. Enjoy your snacks. And good luck for Morocco. Well, I mean, it's very biblical, right? If I am tracking what you think we're saying is Tolkienish, which is my like knowing the good things you could do to fix problems and then just not doing them. That's from the Bible, right? It's, if you know the man who knows the good he should do but does not do it sins. I was thinking about it this morning on my drive home. What with having essentially secret police on the streets just disappearing and killing people, which is what is happening. It sounds hyperbolic. It's not hyperbolic. Disappearing for sure. Killing, not happening a lot, but high profile recently. Shooting an American citizen in the face in her car. I was just thinking about the 1930s in Germany. I don't know why. It's rattling around in my head, But if you were a non-Jewish citizen in Germany in the 1930s, and let's say you were a Christian, all right? Now, this is already a flawed approach because anti-Semitism was extremely popular. But let's just pretend that you are like a principled Christian, and you see secret police on the streets disappearing your neighbors, disappearing people throughout the country. Would it be right morally for you to intervene? Would it be right for you to commit a crime, perhaps, in the name of protecting somebody who is being unjustly targeted? Because here's the thing, right? One talking point is, well, they're illegals. Don't you want us to get out the illegals? And first of all, obviously, the correct woke response to that is no one is illegal, right? But a lot of people at the moment are illegally in the country because it was recently decided they were illegally in the country, right? They were legally here through some visa program, or they had refugee status, and then the government said, actually, no, you can't be here. So they came here legally, and now it's illegal for them to be here. So what that means is anybody could be declared illegally here. So that's not a good barometer, right? That's not a good justification. Say, well, they're here illegally. Some of them certainly cross the border without going through the proper channels. I don't give a shit. I do not care, right? People have no idea what our immigration policies used to be like, which were none, or then only white people, right? Like, immigration policy changes over time. People coming through Ellis Island came through with no papers, nothing, no English, no job skills, fucking nothing. And they just shuttled them into the country. It was fine. You know, we're a nation of immigrants. But the point being, the Jews in Germany were there legally. They were allowed to be in Germany. They were German citizens, you know. They might have been in Germany for a very long time, hundreds of years. Who knows? But at a certain point, the laws changed. And you have to decide, is the law just? Or is it more morally acceptable to resist a law that was changed to target people? Now, obviously I'm a bleeding heart liberal, but I think the parallels are uncomfortably obvious. I try not to talk all that much about the current regime, right? I have many frustrations with American politics in general, the way we spend our money, but it's every day. It's every day there's a new atrocity, right? But the atrocities are coming thick and fast right now. And you know what I haven't heard in a couple weeks? I haven't heard anything about Jeffrey Epstein. Because we have done a hostile takeover of Venezuela and an ICE agent shot a woman. So that's no longer in the news. I'm sure it will come back to the news, but like I try not to focus too much on this because it's difficult to talk about it in a way that's respectful, right? So many people, and I think some people, it's a self-report, but people like to focus on the lurid details and the, you know, all the creepiness. That's really doing a disservice to the women who are victims of the creepiness. And possibly boys. I don't think that's ever been alleged, but, you know, some people enjoy both. I try not to get too into that because I don't think it's really useful or healthy. But I know that the federal government was given an order to turn over all of the files after 30 days. And not only did they not turn over all the files, or even close, I mean, like 1%, 5%, but not only did they not turn over all the files, they also then said they found millions more files. And so are there no laws? Like, are there no laws now? Because it sort of feels like you can just do what you want. Yeah, I know we had a deadline. It wasn't a deadline to start handing them over. It was a deadline to hand them over. This is the day. 30 days, we get all of the files that you have. Not 30 days, you release some selectively... Listen. Again, I try not to get too into the conspiratorial weeds, but I am going to use my common sense here and say, if they have millions and millions of documents or whatever, if you have all of this, like, genuinely, like, millions of documents, right? Files, etc. It is awfully implausible that the only documents that got released happened to be documents that made Bill Clinton look bad. Fuck Bill Clinton, okay? He's a fucking rapist. And he was trying so hard to cater to Republicans that he was tougher on crime than Republicans. Fucking. But I mean, you would have to be a moron to think that that was just coincidental. Like, ah, man, here's the only files that we are willing to release, and it just so happens to be that there's a bunch of stuff about Bill Clinton in there, and a few other people that we, like, vocally hate, but nothing else. And, in fact, we're going to redact some files. We're going to release some files that are already public, but there's a picture of Trump in it, and we're going to redact it. It makes me feel like a crazy person, right? And I take comfort in the fact that I am hardly alone in seeing how brazen it is. But what makes me feel crazy is that, like, there's nothing to be done about it. It's just happening. I know it's happening. And there's nothing we can do. There is no action I can take. And likely no action will be taken. Right? This just flagrant... And you're gonna fucking ticket people for jaywalking. But this flagrant violation of law by governmental agencies that are supposed to be subject to the law. And basically what the Republicans have figured out is, if you say, we're just not going to follow this one, Democrats won't do anything about it. Because Democrats are so... When's the last time a Republican, like, considered Democrats people with good ideas? Even if they were ideas different than the ones the Republicans had? Like, the right wing is very tribal, very committed to the right wing. But liberals are scared that they're going to be painted as, like, insular. Oh, it's the Democrats won't reach across the aisle and work with Republicans. You know, it's a very scorpion and frog sort of relationship there. But Democrats are afraid of being talked about on Fox News like they won't work across the aisle, or they don't have any real principles. You know, there's a lot of that. And so, like, you because the Democrats are afraid that if they make a move to enforce the law, let's say, they will be accused of doing partisan politics, weaponizing the legal system. And for whatever reason, they are afraid of that. Even if you can say, no, this is the law. Right? Because Fox News is not telling their audience that. And that's basically the only form of popular news media that Republicans will consume. My parents are smart people, and I love them very much. And I know that the only news media they consume is Fox News and shit to the right of Fox News. I know that. They don't They are not interested in hearing something from CNN. Look, I don't watch CNN. I don't watch CNBC. I don't watch NBC. I don't watch modern news media. I try to keep up by reading things. But they do some actual reporting, you know? I'm going to say they do some actual reporting. Not a lot, but they do some stuff that's real. But my parents are so inoculated against any media that could have a liberal bias that they will reject the information. They'll reject studies that have been done because they're liberal, I guess. And it is really infuriating. Yeah, it's a good word. And I can't talk to them because I am too liberal, right? I am too liberal to be trusted. Because like they don't know how liberal I am. Here is what my mom considered to be disqualifying for my counsel to be trusted. And she'd probably say that she doesn't believe this anymore. But I was living in LA in 2018 and I voted in the primaries for, or maybe the general, I don't remember, for whoever that black lady was that was the senator from LA for a long time, or the rep from LA. I can't remember her name. And because I voted in Los Angeles, the bluest city, one of the bluest cities in the country, and I voted for a candidate who was going to win overwhelmingly, who did win overwhelmingly, over some Republican that I have never heard of, who couldn't possibly win. That was an indication that like my values were compromised. And okay, so now anything I say is perceived as coming from this antagonistic left-wing angle, and so you just don't have to engage with it. And yeah, it's really frustrating. I would like to talk to my parents, who I know are caring and thoughtful people, about stuff that I think we should be able to agree on, you know, in the thoughtful and caring realm. But pretty much the only thing I feel comfortable talking to my parents about is sports. And that's a bummer for them because we don't talk about God. And it's a bummer for me because I can't talk about anything else. I like sports, but I don't. How much sports do I talk about on the stream? You know, I like sports, but I do not need to only talk about it. I try to be aware of what's happening in the world. There are a lot of things in the world worth being aware of. But it just, yeah, I don't know. I don't know, and I have a hard time imagining it will improve as my parents get older, which is disheartening. But it could be worse. You know, I do have a relationship with my parents, and I know that my parents put their money where their Christianity is, right? And their time. So they do good things. They care about people. My parents are really involved in a drug. There's a word for it that I can't remember. But basically, instead of going to prison, you can go to this drug intervention place in Arkansas. And look, I don't believe in God. I don't think that Christian addiction centers are really that good. I think there are a lot of problems with them. But the judges really respect this program. And if you complete it, it's a year. If you complete the year, in many cases, not only will you not have to serve your sentence, but your record will be expunged. We're talking tens of felonies in some cases, primarily drug dealing, right? A ton of meth, a ton of like heroin, high level drug use, prostitution, pretty much always. Maybe like you ended up in a robbery with somebody who had a gun because you were doing meth with them, So these women, the highest number I heard was 151 felonies that one girl had. I don't know what happened with her case. I don't know that she got her stuff expunged. But there are women who go through the program who have been in and out of prison and have had run-ins, previous to this stint, who can get their records expunged. And that's tremendous, right? We should do more of that. But so that's great. And I really appreciate that the judges have an opinion of this program where they will make those sorts of decisions, right? They will expunge records. But the emphasis on God often leads to replacing one addiction with another. And it is not always positive to be addicted to God. It seems like it should be, but people have different ideas of who God is and what God wants them to do. So if you have a specific idea of what God wants you to do and you're addicted, then you can become a real asshole. But anyway, I think it's fine. I think but my parents are very involved with that. And they treat the ladies with respect. And they, I think, have had their eyes opened to some things are out of your control, right? I very much grew up with the whole personal responsibility Republican line, right? Phyllis Schlafly, Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher. But the more you understand the world, the more you understand the world, the more you understand that there are all kinds of things that happen to people that affect the way their life goes that they have no control over. None. Right? And on the extreme end, it's the women my mom has worked with who were sold into prostitution by their parents. Or, one of their parents. Okay, that's on one end. The other end is you were heading to school, walking across the street, you get hit by a car, and now you're paralyzed from the waist down. Or the neck down, right? You didn't plan to be a quadriplegic. You didn't plan to require welfare or governmental assistance to live your life. You're a 15-year-old. But now you are in a wheelchair for the rest of your life due to circumstances outside of your control. And so it's pretty frustrating to see people really try to stick to that. We shouldn't help people that aren't able to work for it, because a lot of people would be thrilled to be able to participate in the workforce, and for whatever reason they're unable to. And it affects the lives of their parents in many cases. Some people have to quit jobs to become a full-time nurse. There's just so many things that can happen to change the trajectory of your life that you have no control over, that the whole personal responsibility thing is largely bullshit. Not that you shouldn't try to have, responsibility. Like, that is a good thing. Be responsible. But is it such a good and important thing that you should be homeless if you're not good at it? Or if you aren't capable of it? Here's, Freddie Gray, right? One of the numerous black men killed by police. He had a long history of crime, violent crime even, and which is something that people often use to sort of justify his death as not being all that bad. This guy, he was a criminal. He was a lifelong criminal. Well, they tested his blood after he died, and he had very high levels of lead exposure. So, he was lead poisoned. This is a thing that happens a lot in poor communities. Hopefully less now, maybe less now, but when you have housing for poor people, it often doesn't get updated or repainted. So, the old lead paint chips off, and little kids eat it. Right? This is a known thing. At least it was 30 years ago, right? When Freddie Gray was a kid. What is he supposed to do? Right? How do we deal with cases like that? Because we know what lead poisoning does. We know how it affects the brain. We know how it affects impulse control and, like violent expression. We know these things. So you can't really blame the person who is lead poisoned because they're not in control. They're not. They are not in control of their brain. At least not in the sense that people who aren't lead poisoned are. And so what do you do with them? Right? Do you put them in a home? Do we kill them? Because this is a question I genuinely don't know how to answer this, because people who are severely lead poisoned are often a danger to themselves and others. So, how would you account for that? I'm sure people could figure it out. But what you shouldn't do is just let them end up on the street, in and out of prison, because of a condition that they are not responsible for. Now, this is not connected. All right, I'm not connecting these dots and saying that that is intentional. I'm just saying prison labor is basically free and it's mandatory. So if you are somebody who is not a productive member of society, you're not keeping a job, you're on the street, you're not paying for rent, whatever, we can stick your ass in jail and make you work. And you will not get paid a remotely respectable wage for your work, but you are not allowed to refuse it. So, you tell me if that's a slave. The work's mandatory and you can't leave. Doesn't matter if they're paying you or not, in my opinion. Anyway, that's one reason we have one of the largest, one of is inaccurate, the largest prison population in the world by some margin. And, it just it all comes back to Christians, white supremacy, and capitalism. Protestant work ethic. I don't know. I don't know how there will ever be change. Hopefully, there will be change that will happen within my lifetime, and I'll get to see it. Have fun getting ready. I know you've got the hair and the nails, so getting the final pieces put together. And I hope you have an excellent time hanging out and drinking wine. Well, thanks for hanging out. Now off with you and go be productive. Ah, 664,000 in local jails, 1.1 million in state prisons, 156 in federal prisons. So, about 2 million. Excuse me. Hard to believe we have 2 million people that are so dangerous that they need to be. Well, you know what? That's not true. There probably are that many people that are dangerous enough to need to be removed from society in some way. But a lot of them are preaching. Or, youth ministers. It just seems like there is a better way. Maybe even a better way that we have done research on and know there are reasons that it work. But that's probably just me being liberal. Alright, well, it's been an hour, something like that. I'm calling it. Off to bed with me.